Hey, this is Seth Harwood. I taught a verbs class recently for the Pioneer Valley Writers Workshop, and I want to talk about different kinds of verbs that you can find in your writing. One of the problems with trying to edit your own work is that you get caught up in the difference between what's in your head and what's on the page. So one of the ways to evaluate your own sentence is to go through your sentences and look at the verbs and the kind of verbs that you're using in each sentence. So as we talked about this, we broke out our verbs into three different kinds: linking verbs, thinking verbs, and visual action verbs. So the first kind of verb, linking verbs, is one that a lot of people use all the time, but writers don't think about very much sometimes. So the main culprit for a linking verb is to be. There are 8 forms of the verb to be. They are is, are, am, was, were, be, being, and been. So if you just have a sentence that says something like, I am tired, or he was tall, it just is basically a noun and an adjective and just sort of an equal sign verb in between the two of those. So when you have sentences that are working like that, they're just really basic and don't do a lot or bring a lot of energy on the page. The next kind of verb is thinking verbs. Those are the ones where Henry remembered what it was like to take a shower, or she reminisced about her time with her mother. And these are worth noting because they're not visual on the page. Our goal in writing is to help the reader create a scene or co-create a scene with the author, with the page. And so when you were just working with thinking verbs, they don't help the reader see anything. And so that brings us to our last verb form, which is visual verbs. Visual verbs are things like he ran, he carried, she walked up the stairs. Things along those lines really help the reader see the character in a setting, in a visual kind of scene, and those sentences will really help your writing get stronger and establish a firm connection with your reader. So the first thing that we did with those was take a page or a paragraph or two of writing from some of our favorite authors. Each student looked at a page from a writer that they had brought in and worked through a paragraph to identify how many linking verbs, thinking verbs, and visual action verbs those writers used. And we found a pretty good mix, but a lot of the strong writers, people like Raymond Carver, Juno Diaz, Amy Tan, they were using a lot of visual action verbs and then a few linking verbs and very few thinking verbs, or just a couple of thinking verbs. So we looked at that to kind of get used to the process of identifying verbs in a sentence, and then we went on for the students to look at some of their own writing and start identifying what kind of verbs they were using. And so we could see that some sentences just had 1 linking verb, some sentences had 5 visual verbs, and maybe that was too many. We wanted to slow down a little bit. A lot of things we were able to diagnose by looking at the verbs in the sentence. But basically the exercise was look at your sentences, break them down, and start paying attention to what kind of verbs you're using. And that gives you a whole new tool in your arsenal to use for revision, figuring out how your writing is working on the page and which sentences and sections of your work you can elevate by using more visual verbs to create a scene that happens in space to co-create with your reader. We covered that in the linking verbs, or in the verbs class here at Pioneer Valley Writers Workshop. Those 3 verbs were linking verbs, thinking verbs, and visual action verbs. Thanks a lot. I'll be teaching an 8-week writer's workshop, Introduction to Fiction, starting in the beginning of February.